Hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of my interview with Collette Larsen. I'm John Tthe. This is Mormon Stories podcast. Last episode, Collette talked to us about growing up in Rexburg, Idaho, her idyllic childhood that was only stained or marred by the guilt and shame she felt sometimes as a very normal, natural teenage girl, learning to understand her body and feelings and attractions, and how that led to her getting married way too early, having way too many kids way too early, and how that marriage led to divorce and a second marriage. A child passed away, and that brings us to this point, along with having some of her family members leave the church, where she's, 38 years old and single, divorced for the second time.
Yeah, actually I'm probably, because my first marriage ended at 38, so now I'm in my early 40s.
So early 40s, and this is around what year?
Oh, well, it's just, I'm too old to figure this out. I'm not very good at math.
Early 40s sometime?
Yeah, it would have been 23, 4 years ago, because I'm 66 now, so.
What would rock bottom have looked like before you start, your business?
Well, creditors, I owe so much money. We did have we had insurance, but of course it didn't cover everything. My daughter's 3 month she was in intensive care for almost 3 months. They quit billing me at $1 million. Okay, so, they put a stopgap in. I got this letter that, and insurance, I can't even remember how much it picked up, but I still had, I was getting outstanding bills all the time. And, I was working part-time as a secretary. We'd gone through pretty much all of our savings. So I had, the social worker at the CF clinic there, I'd taken, now, remember, I still had another daughter with CF, who, by the way, at this time, they were just a year apart. Charlie and Lexi were a year apart. And when Lexi died, Charlie started spiraling downhill so rapidly, to the point that the doctor started talking to me about, she's going to need a double lung transplant within a year, or we're going to lose her too. So much going on in my life. And the social worker said, Collette, this is what welfare is for, social welfare. It is for single mothers like you. I'm single by now. And this is what it's for. You've got all these bills and you've got all these health costs. And so I agreed to go to the welfare office in San Diego. Walked in, and actually this was right before Lexi passed away, because she was still in a wheelchair. I'm getting this a little because she hadn't died yet. Because I had her in a wheelchair and I had Charlie with me, and I took a number and I had to wait my turn. And as I was watching mostly these mothers go into this welfare office, I just couldn't believe that was me sitting there, I have this entrepreneurial family, and I couldn't believe. And we'd done really well, a few years earlier. I think I had a beautiful home and everything. And here I am sitting in the welfare office. And I just remember thinking, I can't go down this road. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to do something. And I really had hit rock bottom.
What does it feel like when you hit rock bottom? What are the thoughts you have?
It's like,
how does it feel?
How am I going to do this? What am I going to do? A high school education. So you think about, could I go back to school? I couldn't go back to school. I couldn't afford to hire someone to do what I did at home. So those sorts of things. And this friend of mine was paying me, I think it was $8.50 an hour or something to work. And every time I'd get a few hours, I'd go work kind of as his girl Friday, and then trying to make this little bit of money go, and my ward at that time was one, and in fact, even the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation one year provided Christmas gifts for my kids. I remember our ward bringing over a tree, and I was one of those. I didn't get money or food or anything, but they did do other things, and friends kicked in, family helped with, so I was just barely.
Welfare. What about church welfare?
No, I didn't go on church welfare, but they did bring Christmas gifts, and they did bring food over occasionally, but I never actually went in and said, I need to go on welfare, because what happened is my brother approached me, and he said, I know this scientist, this company. He was getting involved with this company. And he said it was a network marketing company. Now, I realize as I'm talking here that especially in Utah, in California, I didn't feel this, but I know there's a lot of stereotypical remarks and things that come out. Well, I just saw it as an option, and I didn't actually my brother had been providing these nutritional products for Charlie to be on, and she was doing better, and I was feeling better, and I thought, these seem to be making a difference, getting this. And children with cystic fibrosis, their body doesn't metabolize their food the way it should. So they really, one of the first things doctors have you do is put children on really high quality nutritional supplements. So that's what this company was. And I could see it was making a difference. So I thought, I'm gonna give this a try. Well, that's a whole nother story in and of itself. But I started approaching a few friends, and they weren't very interested at first, but then a couple said, I'll try the product, and this was actually in 1994. This company was only 2 years old, and the first convention was coming up. It was in Las Vegas. I took 3 girlfriends with me. We shared. I packed my lunch. But I remember sitting in that audience and watching the top distributor at that company. And he was just like this normal guy. He had this Energizer bunny he put down. He said, you just keep going, you keep going. And I was watching him going, I think I can do this. Well, I did it.
The point that I want to really highlight, and I agree, there are a lot of, skeptics about multi-level marketing network companies, and there have been a lot of problems with various companies. I wouldn't want that to sidetrack our listeners from the fact that you were a single mom with 4 kids, one who was
just passed away, yeah.
So one had passed away, one was still very ill.
Very sick.
You're bankrupt with bills, and you're needing some job.
Something.
And you're needing a job that would allow you to still take care of these kids.
To stay at home, yeah.
So I mean,
It worked
whatever
for me.
anyone could judge, right? What was it
like
about that job
It was my only option. I could do it from home. I could do it about a product I could talk about a product I was passionate about.
Because it had helped your daughter,
yes,
or you
yes.
felt that it helped your daughter.
I know that it had. I mean, it did.
And it was a supplement company.
Yes, supplement company. And a wonderful company. And I know people have different experiences. Mine has been incredible. I feel like I got lucky. Let's face it. I was in the right place.
You were early.
Well, it's not even that, because I've sponsored people that make more money than I do. But it's a very fair compensation plan, and you got paid for, and people didn't have to sign up either. They could just become customers. So I brought my girlfriends. I remember a couple girlfriends. I said, they weren't interested, and I just said, I'd done this meeting, and neither one of them were interested. And I said, listen, for a year you've been saying you'd do anything to support me. I need you to get involved. I need you to just be on these vitamins for me. And they both went, okay, And so I think in the beginning, maybe a lot of people got involved just because this is something they were doing anyway. So maybe they could buy them from me. But it just started growing and growing and growing. And the next year, I went to convention. And this was before they had any downline management or anything. I didn't have a computer or anything. And it came time for the top earning distributor of the year to come up. And it was a new company, so I wasn't making a tremendous, but it was me. And I remember going up on that stage going, this is me. I'm doing this. It was just so empowering to do something and to do it on my own. And it's not your own. You have a team and everything else. But I made a decision. I had an intention, and I was doing it.
Would you rather not mention the company, or are you okay mentioning it?
Oh, I love.
What's the company?
Usana.
Usana. Okay.
I love Usana.
And they're still around?
Yes.
Okay.
26 years.
Okay.
I'm basically retired now, so I'm not sponsoring people anymore. My sons are my partners, but it was a wonderful company with integrity and fabulous
Based
products.
where?
It's Salt Lake City, but they're in like 23 countries or something.
Okay. And talk about that first year, because sales it's kind of a sales job, right?
Right.
And sales, you just get beat up, right? And you get discouraged. And so talk about that first year. You've seen the Energizer Bunny thing. You're like, I got to do this because I don't know what else I'll do.
Yeah.
Talk about those moments of rejection and self-doubt as a single mom, just because I'm guessing it wasn't just rags to riches in 12 minutes.
Talk about
there's so much managing a new career with kids and fears.
Well, my children they were my cheerleaders. And they were little then. They're teenagers, but Charlie was only, she wasn't even a teenager yet, I don't think. Anyway, but they were still young, but they were like Go Mom. They were helping me. I was sending out letters. I was having meetings in my home, and sometimes I'd invite 40 people, and like 3 would show up. But I told my children, I'm going to do this every Tuesday night in our home. This was back in the days when you had meetings in your home, And I would make our little shakes and have little samples and everything. And sometimes it was just my kids sitting on the couch. But I said, we're going to do it anyway. I've made this commitment.
What kept you going?
My children. And then I started, I got a check. I got a check for $100, my first month. And, your auto order, you had to be on $100 worth of products, And so my brother had been providing products for my daughter Charlie to be on. But he said, and he'd done that for about 6 months. And he said, Collette, if you could bring in a couple people, you could make $100. And I didn't even understand how the compensation plan worked or anything. But I do remember, I sponsored a couple people. I'd sold a few products to a few people. And I remember that almost when that $100 was due to pay for my own product, there was a check in my mailbox. It had Usana in the corner. I opened it up. It was $100. And I sat on the curb and just started crying. And I've told people since, my son, who was a teenager at the time, he said, if I'd worked that hard for a month, day and night and doing meetings, and I got $100, I'd sit down and cry too, So, but then the next week I got another $100, and they paid weekly, and then I didn't get a check, and then it went to $200, and it was just, just kind of did that. And before long, I was making $400 or $500, and I was, starting to be able to pay up some of the bills, and it took me years to get out of debt. So I was doing well, but. I was determined to pay everyone off, and so I think it took me about 8 years to get completely out of debt. But
I heard someone say once you have to learn how to fail before you can learn how to succeed.
Yeah,
was that true? Did you learn how to fail?
I failed, and yes, I got rejection. But someone I heard or I read, I was going to the library and getting all the books I could, not only on our industry, but also on motivation and self-progress and all those things. I became a real student of all of that. I just couldn't get enough of it. Of self-improvement, just anything I could do to.
Because you'd been beaten down.
Oh, totally. And I started believing in myself. I really started believing in myself.
How?
I think a lot of it was attached to actually earning my own income. I'd never done that before. I'd always relied on a man to support me, and all of a sudden, there's my name and there's a number, and I get to take it to my account. And
How did that feel?
It felt great. And I started saying to the kids, once I get to a certain level, then I'm going to take you to Disneyland. Just making promises to my children and having them just get so excited for me. And then when I did go through rejection, it was hard not to take it personally. But I read, I think someone said, if you went into a restaurant and the waitress came up and said, would you like a cup of coffee? And you go, no, thank you. The waitress doesn't go in the back room and start crying, because she's been rejected. You have to think of it that way. You're offering something. It's going to be for some people, and it's not going to be for others. So I quit taking it so personally, and I think I kind of relaxed and didn't seem so desperate. And it's almost like people were attracted to me and our teams. And also, I took the focus off. I was determined to help them start earning income too. And I tried to meet them where they were. Some wanted to be diamond directors. Other people wanted to make $300 a month, enough to pay for their car payment. And so we would sit down and strategize, and it is a really fair compensation plan and, just really good products. And then in 98, I think Usana announced that they were going to open up Australia. I'm a single mom. My kids, Charlie is just graduated from high school. So I've got 4 children, and we're staying at the Marriott for the convention. And we go back to the room, and my kids are all just jumping on the beds and being crazy. And my oldest son said, Mom, we should just go to Australia. And I looked at him and I said, why not? And so by then I'd gotten in a little home. We put it up for rent. We moved to Australia for a year. I took all 4 of them. What an experience we had. And so we helped open that market. And I've helped.
Now, what's that? You've gone from
crazy,
divorced twice, single mom,
crazy.
poverty.
I know.
And you're and all of a sudden you're opening a branch.
I know, it's crazy. But
how did you get the confidence that you could even do that?
Well, I started speaking, as I started rising through the ranks. Then I remember the first time they asked me to speak, and remember I was up doing meetings in front of people. And every time I did it, I got like a little more confident. I was meeting with businessmen, and I was, and
what's that like?
It
Men.
it was okay. I was.
How do you get your power? How do you believe in yourself in a man's world?
I think a lot of it was the reading I was doing. And
what are some books that really helped?
Oh, my goodness, I went back to Norman Vincent Peale even, and those Augmandino, and then I read every book I could on our industry. And
like The Greatest Salesman, The World's Greatest Salesman?
Greatest Salesman in the World, yes, Augmandino. Oh, I mean, I read voraciously.
How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Yes, that.
All that classic.
Yes, all the stuff.
60s
and you know what?
sales literature.
And then I would do these intentions in the morning, and I always call it getting the frog off my plate. So things I was really scared to do, calls I was scared to make, I just make them. But the more success you get, the better you feel. And my kids were like, "You go, Mom." And then Usana started having me speak. So I was speaking all over, and at first I was really fumbling and struggling. But then, and then people come up and go, "My gosh, if you can do this, I can do this." And my story is that, because I read J.K. Rowling said I thought it was profound before she wrote the Harry Potter series. I mean, she went through her own financial crisis, and she said, hitting rock bottom provided a very solid foundation on which to build the life of my dreams. I'm paraphrasing, but I went, that's it. I mean, hitting that rock bottom, there's nowhere else to go. And I built that foundation telling my own story. And of course, Charlie is there with me now, and she was in Australia speaking, and she's fighting for her life at this point, but the products are really helping her. So it was a powerful, compelling story, and I got really good at it. And I started feeling very empowered. And then the money, of course, started coming in, and we've never lived, people, I know the network marketing and the flash. I think I've had 3 cars in the last 20 years, and I drive a 2007 Lexus now. I love it. I think because of where I've been.
It's 11 years old, though.
Yeah. Because of where I've been, I just, I never went in for the, you see I wear a wedding band. I mean, the flash never even appealed to me.
Well, how long were you in Australia?
A year.
Okay. And then you just keep advancing?
Just kept going. I helped open Korea. We moved to Hong Kong, took my kids. In fact, my 2 older sons were married by the time we went to Hong Kong, and I like to say my granddaughter that's 18, was made in Hong Kong because she got pregnant, my daughter-in-law got pregnant there. So at that point, I started bringing my children in, my sons in as my partners. And we've just continued to grow it, and we've been, we've done very well in Usana. I've been top distributors for, last 20-something years.
How many?
Over 20 years.
You were the top distributor?
No, we've been among the top.
Okay,
for
20 years.
Yeah, I was the top distributor, I think, for 14 years. And then
That's amazing.
And then they've opened China, and they've dusted me. They've flown past. But we're still in the U.S. I think we're number 2 or 3, something like that.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've done well.
And again, I'm just trying to imagine this single mom with 4 kids opening up Hong Kong.
I know.
Or, like
crazy.
Like Korea.
Yeah.
Like I'd be scared to do that. I'd be super scared. I've got all this privilege.
Do I think what happens, John, is when you've been punched down so much, it's like, what's the worst that can happen? It's already happened. When you've buried a child, when you've fought for your children's lives, and when you've been betrayed by a man that you loved, and when you've been absolutely so broke that you didn't know, it's like, it's already happened, so why not just go for it, kind of, So that's what I did.
It's really inspiring.
Thank you.
So as you were traveling around the world and seeing all these different faith traditions and cultures and types of people, what does that do to your Rexburg, Idaho brain, to your Pollyanna, Mormon,
I know.
brain?
I remember being in Hong Kong and going to visit various temples and things in Asia, around Asia, and the people were so devout, just praying and lighting their incense, and I'm seeing how intense they are and how, I mean, it's so real for them. It's absolutely true for them. I had an experience in Australia. I remember when I first got to Australia, we were going to the Mormon church there, and it was Australia Day. And the men there were wearing their Australia ties, and they all stood up to sing their national anthem. And I stood up and I was looking around. This sounds so terrible because I was so American-centric, I guess is what you'd call it, because I knew that this was the promised land. I mean, isn't that what we're taught? America was preserved. This is the promised land. We are kind of elite, and I'm seeing all these Australians that are so emotional singing their national anthem, and I'm going, but they're members of the church. Surely they know that America is the promised land. And so just little things like that started cracking, that what's going on here? And then seeing these faith traditions, seeing the Buddhist traditions and having them, burn. They would make paper mache things that were important to them, and they'd burn them so that they would be with them in the next life. And they believed it 100%. So you start going, wow. And then you start doing the math about how many Mormons there are and how many people are in the world. And you start going, maybe we don't have the one and only true church. So certainly in my world travels, that idea started, percolating in my brain.
But you're still faithful when you
totally.
find your third. So talk a little bit about whatever you want to say about the story of your third husband.
Oh, okay.
Your current soulmate, right?
Like the love of my life.
You figured it out.
Yes, I finally.
So how do you find love?
Third time is the charm.
How do you ever trust that you could get back on that marriage horse? Why would you ever want to?
So I told you that I dated a man for a year that was not a member, that I fell head over heels with. He was just... And maybe I'll just say, should I say?
Go for it, if you want.
It's such a crazy story. How do I condense it? When my first husband was leaving me, I got a call from a very angry father begging me to keep my husband away from his wife. He loved his wife. He loved his daughter. He blamed me. Can't you keep your husband faithful? And I kind of... we were just mad at each other, yelling at each other. And he had a baby, and I said, well, guess what? I've got 5 and everything else. And he was, and 2 of them are so sick. And I thought he was way younger than me because my husband's secretary was way younger than me. And at one point I said to him, I have 5 kids. I'm 38 years old. My life is over. And he was quiet for a minute. He said, you're 38. I'm 41, and which was kind of weird. But anyway, he called the next day to apologize for yelling at me. And he just said, I'm just in so much pain. And I'm so sorry. Tell me about your daughters. So we had this very nice conversation. But, he's the wife of the woman my husband is having. I mean, he's the husband of the woman you get it. The secretary's husband.
The ex-husband of your ex-husband's mistress. Right?
So, my kids go, Mom and Dad, so-and-so. Trying to do this little thing. But anyway, he, at one point, so he called to check on me a few days later. Please let me know. I'm so sorry. I'm at fault here too. And could I bring a pizza over or whatever? And I didn't want him to come over, but he wanted to talk to me. And I said, well, I'm taking my girls to the YMCA. So we were going to meet, and I was just going to meet him. And I see this gorgeous guy walking toward me, and I'm going, that can't be. And I just went, oh my gosh. I mean, he's so muscular, he's so fit, and my husband wasn't, and his beautiful head. I mean, it's just gorgeous, I'm thinking, what in the world? Anyway, so I meet him, and immediately I'm thinking he's just way too cute for his wife to be, not cheating on him. So through a series of, we keep calling and we kind of fall for each other. But it's so crazy, isn't it? And I fell in love with him, and he's like this lazy Lutheran, but it was on a broken foundation. Mostly we cried about how could they have done this to us, that sort of thing. We just needed comfort. We comforted each other.
So you didn't marry that first time?
No,
Why?
So a whole year. And then I bounced into this second marriage of mine, and he went away.
Was part of it that he wasn't LDS?
Yeah, oh yeah, he wasn't interested in the church at all.
And you weren't going to marry a
non-Mormon? In fact, he was not only not interested, he was so angry that a Mormon had an affair with his wife.
Had wrecked his own marriage.
Because I thought you Mormons didn't do this. He loved his wife.
Right.
He adored his daughter. So there was all that too, and I'm going, no, don't judge us all by all that sort of stuff. So anyway, he went his separate way. I didn't see him or talk to him at all.
For how many years?
Until my daughter died, and then he showed up at the funeral. And I was like, oh my goodness, but he had been following, the news had been covering her a lot. And so he knew, and he just showed up, and I thought that was so sweet. But I was married at the time. But then that marriage fell apart, but I was never going to get married again. So years later, like 12 years later, he runs into my daughter, Charlie, and her fiance at the time at a little surf shop, and he says, how's your mom? And, I was single, and he said, Charlie said, maybe you ought to give her a call. So he calls me, this was about 15 years ago now. He calls, and I'm like, oh my gosh, he already broke my heart. He's still not Mormon, and I'm so Mormon. But anyway, he said, can I just come over? So he came over one Sunday afternoon, and we talked, and we talked for hours. And I just said, you're still her dad, and they're still married. Our exes are married to each other, and I'm still Mormon, and so anyway, I just wasn't interested. So it was like midnight, and he was leaving, and he said, well, can I at least give you a hug goodnight? And I said, I hug everybody. And he said, not like this, you don't. He just grabbed me, and my heart just exploded. And it has stayed exploded ever since. I mean, basically, we were together. I didn't marry him for 3 years. He proposed like 3 times. I just wasn't going to go there. But
because you had been betrayed.
Yes, I wasn't going to risk it. I wasn't going to risk it again. And so he finally joined the church. He took the discussions.
That was a requirement on your part?
Oh, absolutely. 3 times missionary discussions. And he finally said, okay, I'll do it.
Do you think he got a testimony? Did he just convince himself he had a testimony?
No, I think he convinced himself.
Did he just lie to you?
No, I think he convinced himself that it was as good as Lutheranism. I mean, it's just, why not?
If I have to do this to get the woman... But then it's not lying, though. It's just... No.
And the ward was great. He loved the ward, but he never really knew the doctrine or anything. I mean, he never read the Book of Mormon he didn't know the doctrine other than what I would try to explain to him. He really got hung up on some things like, some of the stuff he got hung up on was so weird, like Hitler. Like, where is Hitler right now? Like, does that matter? He didn't want there to be a second chance for Hitler. He wants him to be and I would go, honey. And then he had this thing about a God that would allow this wonderful family going to church to be hit by a drunk driver, and he survives, and the whole suffering thing.
He's a thinker.
He just couldn't get his mind around all of that. But he joined, and he was active in the ward. He was the oldest man in elders quorum, but he was always moving people. He's very strong, anyway, and the ward members loved him. But then I that wasn't good enough. He was going to go to the temple. He has to go to the temple. That was probably not the wisest move on my part.
Why? What happened?
It was a disaster for him. I mean,
Do you want to say his name?
Rick.
Okay.
Yes, Rick Macy, the love of my life. He doesn't know I'm doing this today because I'm in Salt Lake. He's going to go, what? But he supports everything I do. And so he finally agreed to go to the temple, and he was so nervous about it. And I kind of tried to prepare him, but I didn't. And I looked over at him, and sweat was just pouring off him. He had his clothes on wrong. I don't know how much I can say, but he'd put it on the wrong side. Men were trying to help him. He was fumbling, and he couldn't get back. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so, and we come out, and he's like, what was that? And he goes, what's this? He points to his head, and our stake president is there, and he goes, what is with the hat? and our stake president, or the guy with him, said, it's a symbol for a crown that a king would wear. And he goes, oh, what? He was just like, he's so literal, and he's so... it just was, it was not good. But I was so thrilled that it was coming up on Valentine's Day, and he gave me this beautiful gift and this card. And he said, honey, I know it means so much to you. Let's make this for eternity. And so he, because I wanted to be sealed to him. So that kind of started the real, that going down that whole thing, because I had to get another sealing canceled.
Was that hard?
Oh my gosh, that was just horrific.
Why?
Because
what's horrific?
The letter they gave me, they wanted me to go back to after my first marriage, list any anything I might have done.
Sexual activity?
Sexual, yes, any sexual. I'm going, oh my gosh, I know we crossed the line. You can't, it's years ago. And it just, here's something, this is pretty maybe bold, or I don't know if it's even appropriate, but when you've been married for 21 years and now you're suddenly single and you're not supposed to do anything, and you're so used to intimacy, and then you're falling in love, and like, you're not even supposed to like French kiss or whatever. It's like so, I mean, it's absolutely unrealistic, I think.
Plus, do you want to marry a third time having never been,
the second
you know where
time.
I'm going.
Yeah, if I had moved in with my second husband, we would have never gotten married. I knew almost immediately. We just weren't compatible. So no, but even with Rick, I was going to be, I wanted to be, we tried to be really good.
It's that childhood shame again.
It's so dumb. It comes flooding back, and it's just, I don't know. I think it's so unreasonable.
And the church, so one of the statements in the Book of Mormon is, woe unto those who call good evil and evil good. What would you have the choice, good or evil? Teaching someone to rush into marriage without knowing them, without even knowing whether you're compatible, good or evil?
That's evil.
Why?
It's so damaging to families and the repercussions that go out with your children and everything else. And then you're left so broken and shamed and feeling like a failure. And
then getting to know your partner in every way,
intimacy,
before you decide to get married and commit the rest of your life to them, good or evil.
That's good, but that's so against everything that we're taught. But no, I don't, it's so, what does my son say, bass-ackward or whatever, like it's just wrong, the way we set it up.
So the temple ceiling, you're trying to remember.
So, and I remember one day just having, because I even had to go back to dates. So I had this old box that says divorce records. And so I'm going back trying to find dates, and I'm reading some of the court, and I just have, everything comes flooding back to me, even from my first marriage, things he would say in court and stuff. And I'm having kind of this breakdown. And so I decide to, just go see the bishop and just say, this is so triggering to me. I just love Rick, and he wants to be sealed to me. I mean, this is a huge step, So I go in, and I have this talk with him and this interview, and I'm in North County, San Diego, and this is such a good man. I mean, this is a good man. His son works for us. His son works for Rick on the yard and everything. We really love their family. And so I'm kind of pouring my heart out to him, and pretty much done. And I am like, this is just a few years ago. This is like 62, maybe 4 years ago or so. And
by this time, your former husband, what?
Oh, he's a temple worker, yeah.
the one who Mary D. Hanks had said would never be able to be.
Yeah. And I'm also a temple worker, but I make sure I don't go. I know when his shifts are, I find out, because I don't want to be there when he's there. It's just.
But for those who didn't hear the first episode, Mary D. Hanks had said once what?
Yeah, if he was excommunicated, he said, if you have another affair, if you cheat on your wife again, and you're excommunicated again, you will never be rebaptized.
Which he was.
And he was, and now he's a temple worker.
And he's taken
the woman he cheated with, he's taken her through the temple. And, I don't even care anymore. That's fine. It's fine, but it was just like another.
For your testimony.
Another wave hit, like, what? Just something else that didn't, anyway. So I'm meeting with my bishop, John. This is kind of embarrassing because I'm 62 or 62, I think, at the time. And so he understands, and he goes, we will fill this out. Do the best you can. But he goes, I do have one other question I need to ask you. Do you masturbate? Now, this guy is in his 40s, I think, maybe 50. And this is just a few years ago. And I'm telling you, I sit there and I'm going, are you freaking kidding me? I can't get rid of these sexually explicit questions that started when I was 12. I'm in my 60s, and you're asking me this? And I'm just like, I'm dumbfounded. And by the way, he called me last year to apologize because I just went.
What did you say, literally?
So then I'm so embarrassed about what I said because it was a complete lie, which is embarrassing to even say that because I went, I'm in my 60s. I don't even like sex anymore. That's what I said to him. I didn't know what to say. I just.
And that's not true.
no, that's not true. That's not true. It's not true at all. But I just didn't know what to say. I thought, how dare you ask me that? I'm embarrassed. This is gonna be, I hope none of my kids. My kids are gonna go, Mom. But isn't that awful that someone? I think it's terrible for the children. But it's one of the reasons I related to Sam, because it's not just children. It's women in a room with a man asking about that. It's like, what? Anyway, so I went home. I was sobbing. I told Rick what happened. He called our bishop and said, if I had been there, I would have decked you. And I'm going, you're making it worse. It was just, everything was just so. And Rick goes, I don't give a crap, He was so angry about that. So, but that wasn't even, I was still active, although I was so humiliated.
Now, really quick, we had skipped over Prop 8, and you had been living in California. Talk really quickly about...
Okay. Prop 8 was just, but I was all in, and we had a special meeting in our stake, the Del Mar, California stake.
And you're with Rick at this time?
Yeah, we're married. He's with
Prop
me.
Prop 8, 2008.
He's a member, and it comes down that the prophet this comes from God, straight through the prophets, from God through the prophet to us, and our stake president is saying, we need to rally the army. We are going to fight this, And so what they want us to do is get up at 5 o'clock in the morning for the next few weeks, like 3 days a week. And we've got these, the signs that you put in the yards. And we were there. Rick and I were up, and we would meet outside behind this bank. And they would give us all these placards, posters, and whatever. And we put them up and down the medians all over our area, San Diego.
What was what were you told the reason for that was? What were you doing?
We're fighting gay marriage. We cannot we can't change the definition of marriage. Marriage is between one man and one woman. Right in the proclamation it says that. This is going to ruin monogamous marriage. If people start, the gays start getting married, it's going to ruin all your marriages. We need to love them. I'm getting quite passionate about this because
it's great. Passion's good.
Anyway, but I was out there pounding. We were pounding there, and then people would come along during the day and take them, and the next morning would put them up, and then they asked us to rally on the corners, so we had banners, and I was starting, and my son that had left the church during this time, they asked if I could come and babysit because they had a wedding to go to. And sure, I love babysitting. And I was up there, and they'd left, and I looked at the wedding announcement, and it was these two men that were getting married. And so my son and daughter-in-law came back, and he said, you just supported gay marriage because you watched the kids. And I was like, and I just had this, I love my son, and I just thought, something's not right here. These are his friends, they're so loving, they're so wonderful. And then I had this trigger back to my cousin that had committed suicide when I was in my early 20s. He had therapy, and he was no longer gay, and he was going around doing firesides for the church, and then killed himself. And this was when I was in my early 20s, and I kept thinking back to this beautiful young man that was just a year younger than me, and we were cousins growing up, and I never sized note or anything, but it had to have been, there had to have been a correlation there. So I had that going, and then I was on the sidewalk holding a sign going, Prop 8, Prop 8. And this car of people drove right in front of me. And this woman looked out at me, and she said, she was stopped at the stoplight. She said, why are you doing this? And I just looked at her, and we kind of made this eye connection. And I could tell she was sad, And I just thought, why am I doing this? Anyway, I'm doing it because God told me that this is what I'm supposed to be doing. But again, another crack, this doesn't feel right to my heart. But obedience, and not only obedience, exact obedience, that's the first law of heaven. It was just pounded into me. So I thought I was being the righteous Mormon example.
What did Rick think about Prop 8 when you first told him?
He didn't like that we were doing it, but again, his whole thing is, happy wife, happy life. So just, he just supports me. He just loves me. He takes care of me. But he told me later after, he said, I hated that. I hated every minute of it. But, I just was wanting to believe the church was true. I'd given up coffee. I'd given up everything, you know. I wanted it to be true, which will bring me to another funny story in a minute when I finally told him what had happened to me.
Okay, so back to 2014, the bishop asks you this horrendous question.
And I'm trying to get a sealing. And I came home and just...
Sealing canceled.
Sealing canceled.
So you can marry...
So I can be sealed
Rick.
to my real sweetheart that I hope there's a life after this because I want to be with him forever. I really do. So I came home and I told Rick, he called the bishop, he was so angry. And I started crying. And it's like years of shame and guilt and repression and anyway, I couldn't quit crying. Rick is holding me and I said, I'm going to ask to be excommunicated. I want to be excommunicated. He goes, what? And I said, I know I've made so many mistakes. I don't know. This kind of goes back to your scrupulosity. I don't know if I was forgiven for everything and I can't remember everything and I'm worried I've missed something. And so I just want to be excommunicated and start over. And I'm just like crying, you know. And there's this place that I go. It's kind of connected with this Usana. It's called Salon Aviv. It's this health retreat just over the border in Mexico. And I was falling apart. I felt like I was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. And I said, I haven't even talked about my daughter's double lung heart, the other daughter, because that's all happened too. Well, anyway.
You throw it in when you want.
Okay, well, let me just do the church stuff, and maybe we'll go back to that. But anyway, I go down to Salon Aviv, and while I'm there, I get a call from my really good girlfriend who's teaching Relief Society on the first vision. And we're talking, and she said, do you know there's more than one version of the first vision? I go, no, there's not. I know it by heart, you know. And she goes, no, I'm teaching a lesson. I just actually wanted to get Joseph's actual words. And she said, no, you're wrong. There's not. I know there's only one, you know. So I get off the phone, and I have my computer with me, and I Google Joseph's first vision. And I literally cannot believe what I'm reading. And then I go to LDS.org and try to reconcile it, but then I go, how does anyone forget that they saw God? I mean, I get he's talking to different audiences, you know. I mean, so many people you've had on here. We all have the same things, don't we? And we start on one thread, and it just becomes all this, and it just started.
But talk about your studies. It's okay to repeat. So first vision, what are you thinking?
Well, it started with this interview, these sexually explicit questions and the shame and guilt that brought up. I remembered being a young women's president when I was in my early 20s and going to a bishop about some of the girls in my class, and they'd asked questions to him. It was like, ask the bishop a question. He called me in because he said, one of your girls asked a question in the box where he's supposed to, about oral sex. And I go, oh, I'm so sorry, you know. And he goes, what is that, you know? And so, and he's 10 years older than me. And now when I think, I'm going, you don't, what? You know, again, this man, woman, and he's asking me to just explain what that is. And I'm maybe 25, you know, and he's probably 40 or something. And I get thinking back on all this stuff, and I'm just going, it's creepy, it's icky, and it kind of brings all that up, and I start thinking about all that, and then I study the first vision, and then...
And the problem with the first vision for you was?
Well, that there were so many different, and that he didn't even tell about it for so long. He didn't, and then there's so many versions of it, and one is Jesus, and one is God and the Savior, and one is an angel, and, you know, and then my sister about this time sends me Denver Snuffer's Communing with the Lord Through the Veil or something, and I read that and I'm thinking, okay, that I need to just up my game because I'm having all these. So then I Googled Denver Snuffer, and somehow that brings me to Mormon Stories.
Because I interviewed Denver Snuffer.
Okay, so this is, again, a few years ago, and I'm going, Mormon Stories, I listened
and he was
to...
excommunicated 2013, I think.
I don't think he'd been, okay, so maybe he had been excommunicated. I didn't even, but anyway, somehow that led me, and then I saw this Mormon Stories, and I pulled them up and saw, you know, all these episodes, and I started listening. I think it was Margaret, was it the Toscanos or something? I listened to a few, and I was going, and then I decided to go back to the beginning, and I'm going, I'm just curious what these other, and all of a sudden, because I was feeling so alone in this cognitive, I didn't even know what cognitive dissonance was, you know, but now I understood it. And so I went back to your first, when you're talking about your missionary experience, and I'm going, wow, and I just start listening and listening. So anyway, I decide, that's right, 2014, I decide to learn everything I can. So I order all these books, some of Michael Quinn's books. I order In Sacred Loneliness. I ordered Rough Stone Rolling. I get all these books. I think my story is so similar because you just go, I'm going to figure this out, and this has got to be true. And I start listening to podcasts and reading, and I listen to Doug Fabrizio some, and anyway, and I totally go inside. I push Rick away, kind of, not push him away, but I just retreat. And I start sleeping on the couch. I can't sleep. I'm up and down all night long because I'm listening, and then I'm going back to sources, and and
you found CES-letter?
CES-letter, I read that over, all night, one night, crying through it all and just going. And
what were some of the other big issues besides First Vision for you?
Well, then I went back to my high school again, my high school days, and the whole blacks in the priesthood. It's actually the temple ban, but because I remember my cousin bringing a friend who was African American, and I just thought, why? I wonder, that just doesn't seem right. He's such a nice guy. And so those sorts of things. Of course, Rexburg, there wasn't much diversity or anything,
People of color.
But still, that always bothered me. And then when the 78 came, and that could, they could now hold the priesthood, I thought, oh, that's so strange that this unchanging God changed his mind. So I started studying that. And then we had a Lamanite. After I'd married and moved out, there were still 9 children at home, but my parents had taken in a little Lamanite girl, and
Native American.
Native American girl. They were called Lamanites back then,
Yeah,
of course.
right.
And I got thinking about her and then I read, or one of the things was, I remember Michael Coe's. Who's the guy in New Zealand?
Simon Southerton.
Yes, I listened to him.
What was it
and
about
read
Coe and Southerton?
the no evidence, the no DNA for the Book of Mormon.
Yeah.
And I'm going, no, this is the book that is my life. I mean, my foundation. And I start and then I get onto the priesthood and when it was restored and how, and then there's no, all of them. Each thing, it just started.
That there's no evidence for the Melchizedek priesthood restoration at all?
None, no evidence. And then I start watching YouTube clips of people who believe that I thought they were bearing their testimony. It turns out she's a fundamentalist LDS bearing her testimony. I thought she was and then I start listening to these guys before they blow themselves up, and they're bearing their testimony about, Allah, and I'm going, they're more passionate than I am. So all these things start swirling around in my head and everything, and I'm just kind of going crazy, but I've got all these active kids, and they're all these grandkids, and I'm the matriarch of this family, and my husband is converted, and I just, oh my gosh, I felt like I was in a whirlwind.
So I could imagine, well, there's 2 things. Question 1 is, there are a lot of people that just won't even allow their minds to go there. So, and what I have learned from talking to a lot of people is there has to be an emotional break first, where emotionally you just really realize something is rotten in Denmark. And it's that emotional break that leaves you open to the evidence. So your emotional break was the sexual explicit questions?
I think that kind of started it.
Okay.
And then I started because I was ready to be excommunicated. And then I go, what if it isn't even true? You barely kind of open, what if that little crack?
So you have to have that emotional break first.
Yes, but then you start.
But then the other thing is there are a lot of people that would read all that stuff and just go, I can't go down this road. I'm just going to close it up, block it off. What kept you from just saying, I'm in my 60s, I brought my husband into this, all my kids are in it, I'm pushing it, I'm putting it on a shelf, pushing it away. Why did you keep going?
Well, I did that. I did that a few times. I decided, and then I would try to forget it. But I think once you can't unlearn this stuff as you learn it, and you realize it's real and it's documented, you can't, it's there, and then you start feeling like you're faking it all the time, like you're sitting in church. And I remember, a few lessons, it was just, I can't remember exactly what was said, but I went, that's not even right, and the circular thinking, I got thinking back about how I had convinced myself that Heavenly Father needed Lexi worse on the other side, but if she'd been, just that circular thinking you do.
Wait, other side. Go ahead and say Heavenly Father needed Lexi, but then what?
But she had a blessing, and I felt like, so if something good happens, then God gets all the praise. I've been blessed. I've obviously been righteous enough. But if it goes the other way, then this is a test, and I've got to pass this test. And he obviously needed her because she was so special, and all those sorts of things.
Or you had made a mistake.
Yes,
right?
I might have messed up. I went through a lot of that to get, what did I do? Why am I being punished?
So the church wins either way.
They win. They win either way, and you lose either way. Really. In some ways, just because of the mind bending that you have to do. Well, through all this, I just was struggling, and Rick and I were getting more and more distant because he'd go, what's on your mind? I'd go, nothing, I'm okay, that sort of thing. Like, I can't. So finally, we have this little trailer. We went on this little trailer trip up in the Cuyamacas, and I, of course, had my butt in and was listening to Brent, like the 10-hour Brent Metcalf or whatever, on this whole trip. And I was so distracted, and he'd go, could you just talk to me? And I'm going, and anyway, so I finally take it out, and I'm listening to Brent, and I'm so energized by Brent's courage, and by his just being just real, And I remember him talking about how his faith just like crumbled all at once. And as I'm walking along hiking, I'm going, that's happened to me. He's talking about my life. And so I take the bud out of my ear, and I say, honey, I need to talk to you. And he goes, what? And I go, not here. We're hiking. When we get back to the trailer, I need to sit down and talk to you. So we get back to the trailer, and he's like, what is up? And so I go sit down, and I look at him, and I can't speak. And I just start crying. And he goes, what? And I go, the church isn't true. And he's like, the jaw drops. And I go, I don't think the church is true. And I'm crying and everything. He goes, does this mean I can drink coffee? That is what he has to say. Like, my life is falling apart. He goes, does this mean I can drink coffee? I'm going, and anyway, so I was crying, and then he starts laughing, and he comes over and hugs me. He goes, I thought it was us. And I'm going, no, I love you so much. And he thought I was just pulling away from him or something, And so he holds me, and I cry, and I start telling him about, and then I go, you've got to listen to this, Greg Prince, I've got all these things I have to, and he's going, it's okay, we're going to be okay, and
why Greg Prince?
Because he was talking about big tent Mormonism, because at that point I just thought maybe we can still stay active. His daughters joined the church, all our kids, they're just so,
Rick's daughter.
Yeah, Rick's daughter has joined the church, and so I wanted him to hear the big tent Mormonism thing. I thought, maybe we can just go as non-believers and fake it for our kids and all this, but anyway, we've laughed about that moment so many times, and I said, yes, you can drink coffee, and oh my goodness, and so then we just kind of floated along for a while.
Kept attending.
Mm-hmm. Somewhat, not all the time,
Became a buffet Mormon, a cafeteria Mormon.
Yep. And then the November policy came out. And like everyone
2015,
else,
November.
I thought it was a joke. I thought it was a hoax, And I could not believe it. But I still didn't, I was just sickened by it. I couldn't get enough of learning about it.
What made you sick about it?
Children not being, innocent children, the articles of faith, that we believe, that, and...
Innocent children what?
That they can't be baptized if they have a gay parent, or if they're living with a gay parent. I just thought, I couldn't imagine that. I thought it was a hoax. That can't possibly be true. That can't possibly be true.
But you had fought,
Yeah, I know, but I had realized I was wrong on that.
Okay.
Some time ago. I knew that somehow they'd gotten that wrong. Kind of like they'd gotten a few other things wrong now, and now I was reading the essays, and, they were, saying, we got this wrong, kind of, we disavow this and that, and so I go, but this can't, and then I was so upset about that, and, even talked to my kids about it and everything, but, it's okay, it's God's will, Mom, we don't understand, we'll understand later, that sort of thing. And then, John, when Russell Nelson and Wendy, I think they were in Hawaii, and I watched the live stream of him saying that this had been revelation. And I remember closing my computer, I'm not even talking to Rick about it, closing my computer and going, I'm resigning, which was a huge, huge thing for me. And so I talked to Rick about it. I said, I'm resigning. He goes, oh my goodness. And he goes, I don't know if I can. I'm going, you don't have to. And he said, I might even still keep going. I go, that's fine, honey, but I'm done. I'm not going back ever. I'm resigning. I filled out the paperwork. It sat on my table for about 3 days. I couldn't even bring myself to take it to the post office, but I said, take it, please. And he mailed it, and I resigned. And then he followed me a few months later. But
that's a scary decision to resign.
it's scary. It's so scary when you have siblings, I guess 7 of my siblings are very active. Excuse me.
And kids?
My mom, my beautiful, sweet mother.
So a lot of people are just like, okay, I'm either going to just keep faking it or I'll just hide it.
Yeah.
Either quietly resign or just stop going, but definitely not do anything to upset mom, grandma,
I know.
upset my kids, could hurt my career. I'm sure you were wondering about, there are a few Mormons working for Usana,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
And
I could imagine you saying just for business alone.
Yeah.
So how did
Well,
you?
by then I wasn't doing so much. My sons were mostly running the business, but I think I have quite a bit of, people know me and they know that I come from my heart. And I really did go through some anger through that whole policy and everything, but I've kind of let a lot of that go, and I'm really just trying to love on people, and it's changed my relationships for sure. Some of them are much better, and some of them are not as good. And,
So it did have consequences.
Oh yes, absolutely. My beautiful oldest daughter, when I told her, she cried. She's so, she's a returned missionary. I sent my kids on missions. The whole thing. And she and her husband are very, very active back in the D.C. area. I think he's Young Men's president now. And they're incredible people and incredible parents. But she even said, Mom, you're so old. Why don't you just fake it? You don't have that much time left. Think of your grandkids. And, I'd always done my testimony and laminated it and given all my grandchildren, as they were baptized, they got their whole, the quad from Grandma with her testimony in the front and everything. And it's kind of a tradition and a ritual. And, that quit a couple years ago. And so her youngest boys don't have that. And I didn't go to their baptisms. And just because I actually wasn't invited, I would have liked to have been there. But it's just, his parents have been mission presidents and are very, very well known in the church in the D.C. area and everything. So it's just kind of, I know I've put them in an uncomfortable situation. And my second son is now serving as a bishop and so faithful and so good. And I love them. They're good people, and they're so happy in the church. My first inclination was missionary work. I've got to save my kids. They've got to know this isn't true. And that did not go over very well at all.
How'd that go? What happened when you tried?
There were tears and accusations, and it blew up. It just really blew up on me. And so, it didn't go well at all. So I've asked their forgiveness. I've told them that I will respect their boundaries with my grandchildren. I haven't talked to any of my grandchildren about it. And so I don't know how much they know. I think they know I don't go to church, but it's just a taboo subject. I just hope that at some point, if any of them go through some of this, they'll come, they'll know that I'm a safe place that they can land. And I wrote that personal essay. I sent it to you, and maybe I'll even link it because
we'll share it in the show notes.
It's for my, I wrote it for my grandchildren as they get older because I want them to understand, how this came about.
If they're listening 5, 10, 20 years from now, what do you want to say to them?
I love you. I love you so much. I would never have done anything ever to hurt you intentionally. But I had to be true to my own heart. I had to be true to what I knew was, that's what we're taught our whole lives, to be true, to stand firm for something, to stand for something. And when I realized that there was irrefutable evidence that all these things, and so many of them were harmful and damaging and would marginalize whole groups of people, that's not who I want to be. and it's not who I am. I feel like leaving the church behind. Not only have I lost weight, but I feel
How much have you lost?
Of 25 pounds, and it's just, I think it's because I feel so worthy now. I don't self-sabotage anymore. And it's about time, and I feel like, hopefully I've still got maybe a third of my life left if I live to be 99, I don't know, but I want it to just be vibrant and full of love and service and giving. And, my husband and I are involved with the Tthe Rim Trail. We kayak now, we got kayaks, we're just doing things, I love Sundays, it's just our day to connect and love each other. But I do want to talk just my youngest daughter now, of course the youngest passed away, but my youngest continued to go downhill and ended up having a double lung heart transplant in 2012. And she is thriving. And she has just been called to be the young women's president in her ward. And I don't think those girls could have a more beautiful, wonderful, courageous woman in their lives. She loves those girls. And she is an example. Her faith has carried her through. And I'm so close to her. That could be an hour-long story. I had to move to Stanford with her. I had to leave Rick. And she's married. She had a miraculous baby. She was never supposed to even get pregnant. But here it is, 6 years later, double lung heart, and she is thriving. And she attributes that to her faith, to her Father in heaven, and to her sister saying, I'm going to be there through this with you. And she has so much gratitude for her donor, and who happened to be, we figured it out, she was a wonderful Jewish woman who was a record holder with a strong heart and lungs, and she just had an aneurysm. And, she lives on in my daughter, who's now...
Her heart and lungs.
Her heart and lungs. And Charlie's...
That is a miracle.
It's a whole nother... It's an incredible story, really. The whole story, how it happened, is just incredible. But I watched her, and, I hadn't gone through my faith crisis at the time. I was having some questions, but I was up there with her. And I watched her faith, and that ward up there in Los Altos rallied around us. And, she was to the point where she was in a wheelchair on oxygen and everything, and just waiting. We didn't know if she'd make it, And when I talked to her, and she bears her testimony to me, I'm so grateful she has that. I'm so grateful she has that, and she just holds to it, And she's so loving. By the way, she wouldn't march with Prop 8 because she didn't feel good about it. So that's her, and I'm going, the Lord wants us to. And she goes, I don't feel good about it. So she's very active, and her husband's just, I just love him. I've just got the greatest kids, and my oldest son and his wife and children are just incredible and have never had anything to do with the church. All my other children are very, very active, and it works for them. And my original thought was, I've just got to save them all. I've got to pull them out with me. Think of the tithing they'll save. Think of the, And now I'm trying to just look at it and go, they're all adults. I raised them to be independent, and I need to just respect their agency and support them. So a lot of my anger is dissipating, and I just want to be there to love them and support them, and they've been good to me. My son was here with me at the Usana convention, and I told him I was going to see this bishop that was, fighting for children's rights and everything, and he goes, Mom, I don't want to go. I just don't really. And he goes, but just so you know, I was in scouting so long, I never interview it. I always have an adult in the room with me. And I would never ask inappropriate questions. So I went, I'm so happy. I'm so happy to hear that. But, he doesn't want to, associate with, he's just being the best bishop he can be. And I know that he just loves on the people in his ward. So it's hard because I feel like it's kind of pulled us apart. Because I want them to understand me. Because I know they love me so much, but I know I've disappointed them, and that's really, really hard. But on the bright side, I love my life. I feel like I'm authentic. and I love my relationship with my husband, and I love bulletproof coffee. I love it. I mean, I can't get it through, which was so, I'd never had a Coke. I'd never had a Pepsi until, I still haven't had a Coke or a Pepsi, but, I no caffeine, of course, chocolate, but, I just, no doctor. I mean, I was that kind of a Mormon, and now every morning I get down there with my French press, and Rick comes down and goes, oh my gosh, it smells so heavenly down here, and we have our cup of coffee, and we usually toast each other and go, man, it's a good life.
I'm almost seeing a shoulder there. You're showing. No, that's a good thing. Like, what's that like? Like all those modesty messages and worth and.
That was a momentous day for me, John. I started out with the full on and the one piece, the whole, and I never would go without him. And it was right before I resigned. And I one morning I went, well, why am I still doing this? I don't even.
Doing what?
Wearing my garments. And I wore them. I told you, I hiked to the base camp of Mount Everest, and you are hiking, and you're allowed so little to bring, because the Sherpas are carrying. I brought my garments. I was not going to go a day without my garments on that hiking the Himalayas, because heaven help me, I needed all the protection I could have, so here I'm all this, that was the kind of Mormon that I was. And the day that I decided to take them off, it was the strangest. I felt so vulnerable, kind of just, it felt really, really strange. I went to Target of all places. I thought, well, I have to go buy some underwear, and I remember just looking at, it was just, it was so, I still remember walking back to the car with them and going home and taking them all and putting them in a bag, and I've since given them to some girlfriends to give to the Spanish branch if they want or whatever, because I had a whole bunch that were still in packages, because I liked new garments all the time, And I love not wearing garments. And I love not sleeping in garments. I don't care how old you get. This is like, is this creepy? I don't know. But it doesn't, skin on skin, to just be able to cuddle and things, it's wonderful. It shouldn't be denied to anyone. It's so crazy. You're married, and you should, I guess, but, I always felt like, I've got to get my garments back on just in case there's a fire, whatever, the crazy stuff that we believed.
So what's it like to show your shoulders now?
I'm a little conflicted about it, because I want to go back and be 22 and wear the off the shoulder and have the tight arms and the all of that, because, and I want to put on a cute bikini, and honestly, at this point, I don't want to put on a bikini, no matter how, because things change, I always say the Relief Society wave, as you get older, your skin loses its elasticity. But still, it feels so good, it just feels so good to not have so many layers on and not feel like and maybe that's part of the lightness too, that I feel good.
You're down 80 pounds from your worst, from your heaviest lowest point, right?
Yeah, I gained a lot of weight back in the early, that's been a long time ago. But I'm down 25. I've been the same for quite a few years, and it feels good. I feel healthy.
What didn't work about Big Tent Mormonism for you? Why not? Just like best of both worlds. You don't have to upset your kids. You get the membership. You get all the privileges of membership, but you drink your coffee privately. Yeah. You be discreet. And you look at it like other people look at their churches, or even a country club.
I tried that for a while, and the messages coming across were very, very hard for me. It was hard for me to keep a smile on my face. It's hard for me to not grit my teeth and go, I can't stand this. The whole your doubts and all this, and the whole, don't ask God, not Google, and all that kind of crazy stuff. It's like, what? No. And then, just even things, I haven't been back much, but when my father passed away 2 or 3 years ago, and I went to his funeral, and it was a beautiful funeral. No one in my family knew. In fact, I'm not sure I'd even I hadn't resigned yet. I was going to. But it was in 15. But, the bishop stood up, and I'm sure he's just the best man. But he stood up afterward, and he started, this is how he started, 6,000 years ago, when Adam and Eve were, so he started with the Adam and Eve story and the earth 6,000 years ago, and my son, my oldest son, who's left, was with me because it's Grandpa's funeral, and he looks at me, and we both kind of roll our eyes, and I just go, how did we believe this stuff? I mean, seriously? The earth is 6,000 years old, and he talks about that, and Adam and Eve, literally, the whole, and I'm just like, oh.
Plus, it's your dad's funeral.
Yeah, I know.
Why-
It's like, and it had been perfect. It had been perfect to that point, and then he goes on for a half hour on the whole,
Plan of salvation.
and it was like, for me, it was like, but good man, and my mother loved it, of course, so that's what was important. But every time I've gone back to church since, even for baptisms or something, things are said that aren't true, and truth matters. I think I heard you say that once, and it resonated with me. For me, truth matters, and that's why Big Tent Mormonism does not work for me, because we're still claiming that things that aren't true are true, and they're not. I know there's nuance in a lot of things, and I know truth can mean, but there's things that just aren't true. And I refuse to be.
What about just taking it all metaphorically and symbolically?
Yeah, I don't know.
It's all mythical and metaphorical.
That just doesn't work for me. If everyone was like that, but the fact that we still marginalize people, that there's people who aren't welcome, I mean, they might say they are, but they're really not.
LGBT people.
Yes. And until they're welcomed, but at this point, I don't think I would ever go back, because I've just found a bigger universe out there. There's so much love and so much, and of course, I've gone through my own existential crisis. I wake up sometimes in the middle of the night, sweating and nervous, like what? Because, sharing with my, with Lexi on the other side, that's what, I want that to be true more than anything. I want there to be more. I want to pass through the veil. In fact, when I dressed her body for burial, they wanted me to just cut up the back of her little white lace dress that we got her and wrap it around her, because there was all these little teeny white buttons and this blue satin sash, and the man preparing her body said, just cut up the back and tuck it around her. And I went, there is no way, because when she rises on the morning of the first resurrection, she will be so ticked at me if her little white butt is flapping in the breeze. Every button's going to be done. And I envision that day, because I want to throw my arms around her, and now I don't know if that'll happen. I just say I don't know. And that's hard. That is really hard for a parent who has buried a child to not have that knowledge that I felt like I had. But what I've decided to do is take all of that in my heart, that fullness. I say sometimes my heart is so full it leaks out my eyes. But I just want to take all that fullness and live my life with such passion in her honor, in case 14 years was all I got with her, And now Charlie, after a double lung heart transplant, the average life expectancy is about 4 years, but she's doing great. But I just know there's this thing out there where I want my family to be together. But just in case, I think we just have to make every moment count and just love, 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 kindness and mercy and compassion and tenderness. And I tell all my grandchildren, you're my favorite. They all think, they're my favorite. I just could not love you more. And I hope that's when they see this essay a few years from now, after I'm gone.
This interview.
Well, maybe they will. They'll know that Grandma Coco loves them with all of her heart.
So I'm gonna ask you to address a few people. Okay.
Okay.
First, I want you to address that teenage girl who is messed up, and she's going through the rack of shame with law of chastity and invasive questions, and she happens to stumble on this interview. What do you say to that teenage you who's racked with guilt and shame from her explorations?
I would tell her, you are worthy. You were born worthy. You're beautiful. You're naive. You're normal. These feelings you're feeling should be celebrated. They shouldn't be shamed. And you're loved.
Okay. What do you tell that 18-year-old girl who graduated from high school and the return missionary came home and he's like, we've dated a whole 3 weeks now. It's time to get married. And,
3 weeks, that's about
and
right.
she's facing a proposal. What do you tell that 18-year-old girl who's like, well, I've messed up and this will help me be worthy, and I'll just jump right in and have a ton of kids? What do you want to
I
tell
would
her?
say, honey, your life is just starting. I mean, please get some education. Take care of you first. You've got a whole lifetime. I don't have any regrets having 5 children. I'm so grateful I have the children I have. But oh, how I wish I would have had that college experience, the dorm experience. I wish I would have traveled with girlfriends, maybe backpacked around Europe. I mean, just, be crazy, be adventurous, put yourself first. That's all going to come, and there's plenty of time for it. And it'll be wonderful when it does come. But I've actually learned from someone who's on marriage number 3, which is going to last. But you don't really know someone until you've been with them for at least a year, maybe 18 months. I read somewhere that it takes 18 months. People can fake it for a long time. You need to really know someone. You need to travel with them. You need to see them in all sorts of circumstances. I mean, after Rick came back in my life, I wouldn't marry him for 3 years. And, by then I knew him. I knew everything about him and knew that it was going to be great. So, always there's ups and downs, but overall it was going to be great.
And your thoughts on sex before marriage?
I'm fully in favor of it, except for with my granddaughters. I'm still Mormon enough to not sure. I don't know. Oh, I kind of can't go there. But intellectually, I think it's a great idea. But emotionally, I look at my granddaughters and go, oh, I don't know.
Stay away from them.
Yeah.
What do you tell that mother? Okay, what do you tell that woman who is considering just diving into having kids, but she's torn because she's thinking about, what if my husband dies? What about, do I have a career? Like, should I build up some skills and a career first? What do you tell that married woman who's trying to decide between jumping into kids or possibly a career? Having had to build a career in your 40s.
If she's wanting a career and she's wanting to further her schooling, and I wish I had a PhD after my name. I'd give anything. I think that's just awesome because I love learning. Education is always a good thing. So of course that's a decision a couple has to make together. But for a woman who's feeling like she has to do that because that's what God wants her to do, or the church has taught her to do, to bring all these spirits, there's plenty of time to do that. And I would suggest spacing the children out a little more. I was just having them, and I feel like I hope I've been a very good mother. I think my kids would say I've been, but man, it was so hard to give them all the attention they needed, especially because I had 2 that needed so much attention. So I would space them out more, and I would, and maybe even, intersperse your education, during it, because you don't want to be in the situation that I was in, where you're suddenly single with a high school education, no references, no money, no work history, it's a very, very tough, very vulnerable spot to be in. So I'm all about being empowered, and I think education is what empowers us.
Okay, what do you say to that woman who has been cheated on and is divorced, or who hasn't been cheated on but whose marriage has failed, struggling financially, and wondering how she's going to pick up the pieces?
Well, for so many years I felt like, you make a covenant in the temple, and I just wasn't going to break my covenant. So I stayed in a very, very unhappy marriage for way too long, and I would never encourage that anymore. It's a scary step, but this life might be the only shot we get at happiness, and if you're miserable, you've got to change your circumstances. What I've learned is that there are resources out there. There are people, there's help, there's women's shelters, there's all sorts of things that can help these women, but there's grants and loans and things to get you back in school, and I think there's more out there than we realize. And I guess what I'd want you to know is that, it's inside you. You have everything you need inside you. Sometimes there has to be a mind shift, like, I am worthy. And that's a huge thing, to just go, I am worthy. I deserve this. And then to go after it. But I think there's all sorts of opportunities, and there's places women can go. Don't stay in an unhappy marriage. Don't. And if you are being cheated on, or if you're being abused, get out. I mean, honestly, I'm so grateful I have my kids, but I wish I would have had my kids and then left. But then anytime you try to play that game, then I think, oh, like if my husband hadn't left me high and dry, I wouldn't have become this business success, you know? I wasn't ever going to work. And I've found so much fulfillment in that. So he had to do that. And of course, he had to cheat on me with that particular woman for me to meet Rick. And so you just go, I mean, there's times when I want to go to them both and say, thank you so much. I mean, my life is as full and beautiful and wonderful as it is as a result of all that pain, absolute wrenching pain, brought me to this place. So, you know, it's all good. Maybe there is a God, huh? Maybe.
And when somebody's at the wit's end and they're looking at starting over, starting a new career, a woman in her 40s or 50s or whatever, how do they get up the courage? How do they figure out how to start a career when they've done nothing to prepare themselves for this moment?
Well, I only have my own experience, and you know, I know network marketing. I'm learning in Utah is kind of a, but I do think there's opportunities out there that with very, very little, because you know, usually you can't invest in a business or anything. You don't have the funds to do that. So there are ways to you know, if you don't want to work just an hourly wage, which, you know, you probably aren't going to build an enterprise working an hourly wage. So, you know, I would say if you have an interest in something, maybe you want to be a nurse, maybe you can get back to school, something like that. But if not, look at some options of home-based businesses. For me, it has been a remarkable opportunity. And I have built with absolute integrity, and I never promise big. I mean, in fact, I always promise small and deliver more than we promise. And I'm very honest up front about that it's going to take a lot of work. And I make sure they understand the quality of the products and everything. And I think it's a very viable option. I know I'll probably get a lot of people because I get all the...
You're saying working from home.
Yes, yes.
Home enterprising.
Yes, and
not
there's
necessarily
so much,
network marketing.
Yeah, not necessarily, but if you can figure out a way to work from home and still be with your children, and there's lots of other things other than network marketing, that would be one of them. But oh my goodness, women! I mean, even the Mormon bloggers and things that get the ads. I mean, there's all sorts of things that women are doing to make some money.
Last question.
Okay.
60-ish-year-old woman, grandma, given her life to the church, has children in the church, has grandchildren in the church, and all of a sudden she finds herself in the rabbit hole. And she's thinking, I don't know if I want to go down this hole. I could lose everything. What do you say to her?
Honey, call me. We'll talk. We'll talk. I'll take you out for coffee and we'll talk. Because there are things to weigh, but there is nothing that feels so good. You know, I recently reread The Scarlet Letter. You mentioned it earlier, Nathaniel Hawthorne. And there's that point in there where Hester Prynne, I think her name is, she takes that scarlet letter, she unlatches it, and she throws it. And then she undoes her bonnet, and her tresses fall down. And then Nathaniel Hawthorne has this line. He said, "She did not know the weight until she felt the freedom." She did not know the weight until she felt the freedom. Sweetie, you're 65 years old. You call me, we'll talk.
So you're feeling freedom now.
Oh, yes. So much freedom, so much joy. It's taken a while, and I'll probably have some down, there's every once in a while I have my little anger rants. Rick goes, is this a rant coming on? And, or something. But then I'm just like, and I've never felt more spiritual than I do now. We've got a place up in Lake Tahoe, hiking through the woods, kayaking around Lake Tahoe into Emerald Bay. There's this spirituality about my life that's different, so different, but it seems more, it's bigger, it's brighter, it's I don't know, it's all-encompassing, and I'm loving it.
That's kind of a testimony, isn't it?
Yes, that is my testimony, absolutely.
All right, anything else you didn't share that you want to share?
Gosh, I think we've covered it, John. Thank you so much. I do want to say, of course I mentioned it, that I found Mormon Stories, and I hear people say this to you. I hope you understand how sincere we are. All those nights on my couch with just a lot of times with tears dripping off as I listened to other people who were going through this, and it was just meant it was so validating to lay there and think, I'm not alone. I'm not alone, you know. Other people are doing this. They're getting through it. And people kept saying it gets better. And I'd go, I got to hold on to that. It's got to get better. And you started that. And the countless people that you've helped through allowing us to just share I'm a grandma, but allowing us to share our stories. Maybe someone will hear this and go, my gosh, I can relate to her. And that's just what we need. We need that validation and that confirmation that we're not alone. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
My pleasure. And here you are paying it forward.
I hope so.
Here you are being that light of hope
Thank you.
to other women and men.
I hope so.
So thank you. All right. Well, that wraps up our interview with Collette Larsen. It's been beautiful. I'm really grateful that you'd be willing to, on such short notice, be willing to share your story. And I know it's going to help a lot of people.
Thanks.
So I just want to thank everyone who makes this possible. Donors make this possible. Donators to Mormon Stories podcast. If you want to keep this podcast alive, just go to mormonstories.org, click on the donate button. Whatever you can afford, $10, $50, $100 a month. It goes towards keeping the podcast alive and supporting the infrastructure and the organization that makes it possible. So if you value this sort of content and if it's useful, please support us if you can, and it'll make a big difference. I want to thank everyone who made this episode possible. Tim Corey for producing, Cody Layton for post-production, everyone at the Open Stories Foundation, thank you for all you do. And please stay tuned for more. We have a lot more coming up. I have over 100 people on a list that I want to interview, and that's just the people that I've targeted, probably 150 at this point. So many great interviews to come. Please email us at mormonstories@gmail.com with any questions or concerns or ideas. Please go to mormonstories.org and comment if you like Colette's story, if you want to thank her, if you have questions for her, if you're a person, male or female, who needs support. It sounds like Colette's willing to be
Absolutely.
a listening ear for you. Please reach out to her through the blog. You're not alone, and we'll get you help. Check out WACA. If you are a woman 40 or above and you're looking for a community, there's a beautiful budding community called Women of a Certain Age with over 1,000 people at this point all over the United States, probably outside the United States too. Kim Sandberg Turner is the leader of WACA. They're having a feminist girls camp this weekend in Midway Heber area. And these are just women celebrating and loving and supporting each other. And there's a community for you no matter where you live. And if you don't have a WACA community near you, you can start one. And just reach out to Kim to learn more about that. You can go to Mormon Spectrum as well to get her information. Go to mormonspectrum.org.map. Zoom into Utah, their little pink triangle or square. You can find WACA and Kim Sandberg Turner. And join WACA because there are networks of women who can support you. Along with other communities, wherever you are with Mormon Spectrum, Houston, Dallas, wherever, DC, London, there's a Facebook community or a meetup group, most likely wherever you live. Even Columbus, Ohio, there's a community. You can join it and find other progressive and post-Mormons who need support and who are there to support you. So please go to Mormon Spectrum, find a local community if you need support. And if there isn't one where you live, start a Facebook group or a meetup group, share it with me, share it with Mormon Spectrum, and we'll get it up and we'll recruit so that you can find people who can support you and who you can support because you're not alone. If you need support in your faith crisis, find a coach, find a therapist. Margie and I are available. Natasha Elfer Parker, there are lots of other people. Get help. You don't need to go through this alone. And if you feel so inclined, we're sponsoring these events, these workshops and retreats all over the world. We've got Sacramento coming up in November. We're coming to Sweden and Switzerland in September. We've got the Bahamas cruise in October. And we're just right now trying to decide what events to hold in the coming year in 2019. So if you want to bring a faith crisis workshop or retreat to where you live, email me at mormonstories@gmail.com. Let me know where you want to bring a workshop or retreat, and we'll bring it to you because these events are always rated 4.9 out of 5. And people say that they save their marriage, save their life, help them find community and resources to navigate this faith crisis because you don't need to do it alone. So that's enough with that. Thanks again, Collette, for your wonderful story.
Pleasure.
Tune in again soon for another episode of Mormon Stories podcast. We're just getting started. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.